Good evening, y'all. I hope you're doing well. I am back with y'all for another week and another installment of. I always go like blank right when I jump onto these. Satisfaction or suffering and satisfaction. The series this week is the topic is Osteogenesis Imperfecta. So thanks for joining. Um, I'm Ricky of Ricky Speaks Life, and I'm always happy to be joining y'all. It's really nice for real. I've been finding that um, the testimony video was very impactful last week. If you haven't checked it out, go back and check it out. It's on my Facebook and on my YouTube channel too. So I upload the videos after doing the Facebook Live. I move that to YouTube, and you're more than welcome to go check those out. That would be really cool. So, yeah, as I said this week, I'd like to talk to you about osteogenesis imperfecta. Um, but really, I want to take a deeper dive into uh, John 9 1 through 3 and the impact that has been in my life. So, let me explain a little bit of OI and talk to you if you're not really familiar with that, and if you not really heard about that. It's osteogenesis imperfecta. I'm not going to bore you with all the scientific stuff, but uh, basically it's just the genetics of my bones. They don't produce something called collagen. You know, collagen's in your skin, it's in your nails, your hair. It's also in your bones. So my bones are actually very hard. They're really hard, except for they're also brittle. So your bones, the average person's bones, they kind of have some flexibility, whereas mine they don't. They're just rock hard and they break easily. So with that, I have experienced quite a bit of breaks over my life. Yeah, like quite a bit. I've lost count. I always estimate, and so with that, I always estimate somewhere between 150 to 200 times that I've broken bones. So I was born with 7 broken bones. I had both my legs were broken. Let's see, some ribs and a collarbone, and that was pretty crazy. I know that other people with OI sometimes come out with more fractures, and it's it's a really intense thing. Like, especially for parents, I would say, like, your baby has all these broken bones coming out of the womb. That's intense, right? But you know, even there, like, as I look back, hindsight being 2020, you see God's hand over my life just in being born with broken bones. Like, wow, that's a testament that, I mean, I survived birth. You know, that's pretty awesome. So having broken bones early on was, a big deal. Um, but I'd say in my developmental years, that's where, you see a toddler learning to walk usually and stumbling and falling into things, getting hurt and hopefully picking themselves back up and trying it again, right? Well, toddler years for me were a little different. I wasn't trying to get up and walk, but I was attempting to learn how to get around and move myself like independently. So the way that I moved around when I was a child was I would scoot around on my bottom, and I would use my arms and my legs to move and navigate the house or mobile home. I lived in a trailer growing up, and so I would scoot around a lot. I was really fast. Uh, I remember I would always try to be super fast, going from one room to the next, little kid stuff. But one thing that was really amazing, somehow, I don't know how it happened, but my mom, she toilet trained me when I was a year and a half years old, year and a half old. And that blows my mind because, for someone who's handicapped, like it would seem like it would be more work, but, I was talking early on when I was just very young. I was very talkative. And so I was probably able to talk and say, hey, I got to use the bathroom. I know that one point my parents, um, I just have this memory of a stool sitting in front of the toilet. And I think the idea or the goal would be that I would scoot up onto the toilet. But we found out that that wasn't a good idea. I don't recall breaking a bone, but it just was dangerous. So I remember having a little toilet chair and, and going to the bathroom that way. So my toddler years were different than the average person, as you would expect. I remember too when I would break a bone, like my arm, I learned to scoot around with just one arm, and I had to be careful though. Like, when a toddler is learning to walk, they have to learn to shift their weight from one leg to the next. And I watch people a lot, so I notice the mechanics of how you walk. I can't walk, but I know how it works at least. And so with that said, where you learn to shift your weight from one leg to the next, I had to learn to manage how to put pressure on my arms in an appropriate way that I wouldn't break. And I'm telling you these things because I want to bring you into my world, and it's cool because, God's glory is shown even in the little things. And I'll get to that in a little bit later in my talk. And so I scooted around all the way up until, oh goodness, I was going to school. So I got my first wheelchair when I was either 5 or 6. I started late because my birthday is late in the year. And so that was the first time I got my wheelchair, and it was going to kindergarten. And so getting into school during the 90s, and plus I lived in West Virginia at the time, the school system wanted to put me in special classes for, I guess, fine motor skills, like the special needs classes. And so my parents, they really had a challenge getting me mainstream classes. But thankfully they did, and it was a really cool thing because I was able to socialize, and, I'm an extrovert, so that's the way God's created me. I've got some friends that are introverts, and I've adopted them and made them a little more comfortable with people that are super social. But with that said, going to school for me was definitely a blessing because I would say I was able to meet people, and thankfully I've never had an experience of bullying, and that's a blessing in itself. So I thank the Lord for that. And so, really, going to school was, like I said, amazing. But I'll tell you what, when I think back, I actually missed a lot of school because I broke a lot of bones. Um, I, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last in my testimony video, but before puberty, people with my condition are breaking more frequently. Um, New science has come out, and I don't know if that's still true, but I know it was true for me because I broke a lot of bones. I mean, I can recall it seemed that every school year or even every summer I was in a cast. And I can tell you what, I'm going to talk about probably 3 or so experiences and tie it all together at the end. One of the experiences that I remember, I had told you I got my first wheelchair when I was in kindergarten, and it was summer break, and my dad, he would get us, me and my sister, visitation rights for an extended part of the summer. And so when I was with him, one summer, I broke both my arms. And what had happened was my wheelchair, I thought my dad was behind me to help me go down a little step. What he would do is pop the wheelchair back in a wheelie and sit it down. Well, I thought he was behind me, and he wasn't. And so I went out the door, and I fell down a step. And let me tell you, it still kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety when I think about it, because I remember it. I can remember most things like that. And so I remember putting my arms out, like to try to catch myself, and I broke both of my arms, and I'm pretty sure I broke my nose, but they didn't really do anything about that. I guess because the broken arms were probably more important to deal with. So that was a very intense time. That was when the wheelchair fell over and it was on me. And so, yeah, it was pretty, please excuse the noise outside. But yeah, that was a pretty scary fracture, you know. Another time, I can say that well, thankfully I didn't miss school for that one. I believe my bones healed before school started that year. Another time was I was with my mom, and we were living in a 2-story apartment, and her boyfriend was carrying me downstairs for dinner, like to go down for dinner, and he slipped, and I actually, that one's not as clear to me. I remember breaking both of my legs, though, and missing a lot of school for that because I was in a partial body cast, and I do remember that those breaks, that hurt a lot. My legs were in a lot of pain. Yeah, that was pretty intense, but yeah, falling down the steps is a scary thing. I think for anyone, really. So, I'll tell you, last week, I told you about my being hit by a drunk driver. But that was not actually the worst time that I broke bones. It was actually a year and a half prior to that. I had graduated middle school, and I was going to go out to the mall. My dad was taking me out to the mall to celebrate, get something for a gift. And it was pouring down raining. It was so bad, like the rain was coming down heavily, and you almost couldn't really see in front of you. So we get to the mall, and my dad says, "Hey, hurry up, get inside, out of the rain. I'll get you in your wheelchair and you just go. And so I did. And I missed the little ramp onto the curb. And I slammed into the curb. And let me tell you, that was actually the worst break that I've ever had. I broke both my arms in two places, so above and below my elbow, both of my legs. I believe it was just above my knees. But the thing about those breaks is I broke my femurs, the bone above your knee. I broke them in half. So they had to operate, and that was not fun. But that was a year before being hit by a drunk driver, from what I can remember. And the reason I have a smile is because, like, even now recalling these things, it's so neat to, like, look back and see God's hand, that he carried me through all of it. And so I want to read to you, something that's so nourishing to me, because I see God's glory in all of it. And as I made mention that I'm going to dive deeper into John 9, verses 1 through 3. And I'm just going to basically reread it and then go back and tie it together with my stories here. So as I read, as he passed by, he saw a man born blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And so, honestly, actually, let me backtrack here. I do remember, there was a period of time where my dad felt that he was the cause of me having brittle bones or being born this way. And honestly, this sheds light on the fact that no, it's not anyone's doing, but it's really for God's glory. And I can tell you, being born with brittle bones, each time that I do break bones, it's actually like a mission field for me, because there are many, many times I could tell you about breaking bones, but these specific stories that I tell you this time were so impactful for me. It actually had developed a form of PTSD. So even being hit by a drunk driver, I get freaked out by being a pedestrian on the road or on the sidewalk. I have a concern for being carried up and down steps. But that doesn't stop me from doing it. Like, I just rely on the Lord for that. But the cool thing is that, knowing that God's hand is in everything, I have nothing to really fear, because I know that he's going to take care of me. And as I was mentioning, that when I break a bone, I go into the mission field. There have been many a times where the x-ray technician or the doctor, the nurse, if they're not familiar with Osteogenesis Imperfecta, they're usually amazed at why I'm like so nonchalantly talking and not really screaming and yelling and things, but that I'm just content. And it gives me the opportunity to tell them about the Lord and my relationship with him. Like, you may not exactly have something that you're born with, or you may not have something to the extreme of brittle bones. But I would say that we all have some sort of a ailment, whether it's physical or mental, emotional. And I would say, look for ways that you can lean on the Lord in that. Maybe it's a rough past. Maybe it's something that, did happen to you. A trauma of some sort. And I can say, to lean on the Lord gives you this peace and carries you through whatever you're going through. I want to say, remind you of, if you're familiar with Scripture, James chapter 1, verse 2, where it talks about counting it all joy when we experience various things. And I'd say that it's the coolest thing when you can be joyful in your trials. The passage really says, count it all joys, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. So whatever that may be, count it all joy. Lean on the Lord in that. And really, if you're not familiar with what that means, leaning on the Lord, maybe you don't have a relationship with God, it's very easy to do. And all you need to do is believe that Christ died for sin. Yes, you are a sinner. I'm a sinner. Christ died for sin. He was buried, and after 3 days he was raised in accordance with the scripture, in accordance to the scriptures. And so if you believe in that, that's all you really need to do to have this hope, to have this contentment. When life gets crazy, when you don't know what to do, when I'm breaking bones, whenever you're depressed or what have you, whatever you're going through, the Lord's got you. If you lean on Him. And so really, I want to thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching, really. And I want to remind you, the ultimate goal of Ricky Speaks Life, the mission, is that lives will be changed by hearing of God's goodness through Christ on the cross. And that also people who need wheelchairs, they would be touched. And I want to ask if you wouldn't mind praying and pray for Ricky Speaks Life. Pray about supporting Ricky Speaks Life financially. And lastly, would you please like Ricky Speaks Life's Facebook page so that you can get some updates on future videos. So thanks again, and I hope y'all have a great day and a great week.